Welcome back to the podcast of Basketball Love. It is another one-on-one episode. I'm your host, Josh Verlin. We are joined today by the head coach of Muhlenberg College men's basketball, Kevin Hopkins. Kevin, thanks so much for taking some time to talk about your team today. How's the week going so far?
Yeah, of course. It's my pleasure. Appreciate you guys asking me to join and talk about our program. It's been a great week for us. Obviously had a great win over the weekend. Hopefully something that we can build off of and continue to grow as a team and keep getting better as the year progresses here.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. First, of course, have to thank our sponsors. Today's podcast is brought to you by Competitive Edge Sports, conveniently located in King of Prussia, just minutes from 76 and the King of Prussia Mall. Competitive Edge's 5-court state-of-the-art facility is great for basketball, volleyball, futsal, and sports performance. Learn more at cesports.net. So, Kevin, as you alluded to this weekend, a big win for your program, went down to Johns Hopkins, knocked them off 84-77. First, I mean, a little internal turmoil. I mean, you go down to your great-great-great-grandfather Johns and do that to his program.
No, I mean, Coach Loeffler does a great job with his program. I think reading the pregame thing that they put together, I think they're 43-8 at home under him going into that game. So obviously a really tough place to play. I think the Centennial Conference in general is hard to go on the road and get a win. So especially to be able to go down and beat that caliber of program says a lot about our guys and about what they've done so far this year and how hard they're working. So I was excited for them to kind of see the results of all the work they've been putting in last spring and throughout the summer and throughout the fall. That I think our older guys have done a really good job. We actually have 2 seniors on our team that one's played some spot minutes and one hasn't really played at all, in Bobby Lewitt and Matt Kempter, that have been unbelievable as far as reestablishing our culture from the end of last year, obviously underperforming what people thought we were going to be heading into the season. There's a lot of injuries and stuff behind the scenes that kind of led to that, but they've kind of redirected things and gotten us back on the right track here, heading the right direction.
Yeah, just to, let me set the stage a little bit, step back here. For people who don't know, Muhlenberg is part of the Centennial Conference, a bunch of high academic schools, Swarthmore, Hopkins, Muhlenberg, Gettysburg, et cetera, Franklin and Marshall. While it's sort of like the Ivy League educationally, it's pretty much a high major when it comes to the Division III, basketball world. Multiple ranked programs in the top 25, a lot of, really strong year in, year out, wins games in the NCAA tournament type of teams. Last year, the Mules went 9-16 overall. Right now, off to a 5-1 start, 2-1 in the Centennial. Beat Hopkins, top 10 team over the weekend, and a really good Ursinus team. Only lost to Swarthmore, another ranked program in overtime. So, Kevin, you mentioned last year just the 9 wins, maybe underperforming a little bit. When did you get the sense that this team could really turn it around the way you guys have?
I mean, even throughout last season, I thought we were going to hit a point where we turned it around. I think we were something like 10 possessions away from being a 15-win team last year. And so I don't think we were as far off as people maybe felt. We also dealt with a ton of injuries last year. Obviously, we lost our best player, Dan Gaines, who was, as a rookie, he was Rookie of the Year and second-team All-League. And then as a sophomore, his first-team All-League, and didn't get to play as a junior, and then 11 games in, first game of second semester league game, he broke his wrist. He actually broke it playing at Dickinson, broke it in the first half, probably played 3/4 of that game left-handed. We ended up winning the game, but then he was out. And so that changed things for us. And then I think also just coming off of COVID, 2 years of guys dealing with isolation and other issues behind the scenes, and mental health is obviously a big part of everything in the world today, but also I think 2 years of college age men going through being put in isolation, being limited with their social interactions when they're trying to learn how to communicate, learn how to find themselves, that it put guys in a tough spot. And, like you said, the Centennial is a really good league. The last 2 years we've had to play Swarthmore, Hopkins, and Ursinus in the first semester. And those are teams that have been at the top of our league. So obviously a really tough league schedule to start with. And then also played some really good teams non-conference. And so I just think, we've had a good group, and then after the seniors left last year, the guys that were coming back kind of put it in their heads that they were going to change things and get it back to the direction things were going. There was a couple of little things that we had probably slipped on. And so right from the spring last year, all through the summer, I thought we've talked to our guys about commit, connect, compete as 3 ideas for our team this year. And right away they bought into those. And, throughout the summer, they were keeping in touch with each other. They went to hang out at one of the guys' houses. They were keeping in touch with workouts and stuff like that, as far as I know. And so I think the senior class really thought, we have a good, talented group. There's no reason we shouldn't put ourselves in a position to be successful. And so they've really kind of just put their heads down and been really competitive and turned things around for us so far. But obviously there's still a lot of basketball left to be played at this point. So nice that we've gotten off to a good start. And now it's about, we got a really good Drew team coming to play us tonight, very good defensively. They've been playing a lot of zone. And so we're going to have our hands full tonight and see what we can do.
Yeah, I was going to say, now you've got, Division III, unlike most of the Division I conferences, there is that early season conference play. Most leagues go through. Most leagues do not wait until January to start their conference play. But now you have 3 weeks, and I think you're playing 3 games over the 3 weeks, month of December, where you have a little bit of break off from that conference play. Not that these games aren't important, right? But it's not quite the same as when you go play another Centennial program. What do you sort of utilize? What are you able now? Your 6th year, I think, as the head coach, to utilize this month for? Be like, all right, let's look at some early results, and we've got 4 weeks until conference play comes back. How do you kind of utilize that in your favor?
Yeah, I mean, we're big on talking about process. I think it's cliche at this point, but kind of going one game at a time and just focusing on the next opponent and figuring out how good our group of guys can be and how good our team can be, whether that's we're going and playing a conference opponent or we're playing a non-conference game. Coach McSloy's done a really good job taking over our Drew program, and they've had a good start, so we'll have to deal with them. And then obviously playing DeSales. I think Coach CoBL is one of the best coaches in the area. A lot of times they're a regionally ranked team, so having to play them. And then we're actually fortunate we have an opportunity to go out. We're going to play Whitman and Whitworth out on the West Coast, and again, two good basketball programs that I don't think, college basketball, you only guaranteed 25 games. We've talked about this as a group after each of our games. After game 1, it was okay. Look around the locker room. I think we got a special group of guys. They talk about being the most connected group since they've been on campus, that we only get 24 more games. And so each game, just kind of taking it for what it is and taking full advantage. I think our guys have done a really good job. Even our bench guys have been super engaged every game, into the game, knowing the scouting report, really pushing guys in practice and kind of doing the little things that go into making a program really successful. I think a lot of times when teams win, people point to guys that are on the court that are playing and kind of their production and what are they doing and blah, blah, blah. And I think it gets overlooked a lot of times that, for every game we play, there's multiple practices where guys are going against our own team. Kind of how are we getting better each day in practice? And so for us, whether it's we're getting ready for league games or we're getting ready for non-league games, I think there's got to be a level of respect for every opponent that you have. And, I worked and played for a legendary coach and David Hickson up at Amherst College, who retired. He was actually the first Division III coach that was nominated for the Springfield Basketball Hall of Fame. And so he always used to talk about having an edge, and just no matter what you think of the opponent, you got to have your edge. You got to be ready to go. And that the standard shouldn't be win, lose. It should be, are you playing to the best of your abilities with the group that you have, and then living with the outcome. There's, anyone who's won at a high level will tell you there's a lot of stuff that has to go right. You got to get lucky. You got to avoid injuries. You can't have any bad calls, bad bounces of the ball. Last year we lost a couple games where guys banked in threes or front rim, backboard down type of threes that are just 50-50 situations that if you put yourself in those situations and leave things up to chance, they may not go your way. So we're really just focused on, trying to do all the things that we can to put ourselves in a position to have an opportunity to be successful.
Just looking at the numbers, 6 games, only so much you can take from stats, right? But 6 games, I think enough of a sample size to start getting a little bit more of an honest glimpse of things. Last year, you guys were about 32% from the 3-point arc. This year, way up to 38%. Is it just, ball finding better shots, better shooters? What do you attribute that to?
I think it's a few things. I think one, it's a credit to the work the guys have put in the off season of getting in the gym and just fine tuning their shots. I think also guys have bought into making plays for each other, and so I think we're creating some easier looks for good shooters. And then we've also talked to our guys about stolen term, but trying to be great at what you're good at. That if you're a guy who's a really good shooter, be an elite shooter. If you're a guy that's good cutting or driving, be elite at that. If you're a good driver, there's no reason to try to prove you can shoot the ball. Just like if you're a shooter, there's no reason to try to prove that you can go playmate. And so I think guys have really bought into that, and we've kind of, especially as a coaching staff, done a little bit better job of helping guys understand kind of what roles and what the expectations are of which guys we want shooting which type of shots. And again, we've had conversations. It's not saying that someone isn't capable of making a shot. It's what's the best shot we can get as a team with the 5 guys on the court. When I played at Amherst, I played with a lot of really great shooters, and I played in a couple men's leagues and shoot the ball fairly decently now. And people were like, well, did you shoot threes in college? I was like, no, I played with really good shooters. I got them the ball. I'd run the floor or set screens or do other things. And so at the end of the day, I think you see teams that are really successful at a high level. Guys really understand their roles and what it is they can do to add to winning and do those things at an elite level. And they stay away from doing the things they may not. So I think that contributes. But then also, we've had really good guard play so far this year, and they do a really good job of creating for themselves, but also creating for others. And so I think we've gotten a lot of good looks based off of guys just sharing the ball and, going back to the being committed and connected and competitive. Like, guys have really committed to playing together, being connected on the court, and then competing. Like, what's the best shot we can get on this possession? How can we take care of the ball so we're not turning it over so that we get a chance to score the ball really well? That was one of our issues last year was we actually shot the ball, scored it at a pretty good clip as far as effective field goal percentage and other things. We just turned it over too much. So we didn't get enough possessions where that ended in a shot. And so this year, that's something we focused on. And so far, our guys have done a really good job. We've limited turnovers so far this season. I think that's part of it too is, the more chances you get to shoot the ball, obviously, the more you're going to score. So that's something that I think has really helped us so far this season.
Yeah, you went from 14.5 turnovers per game last year to 11 this year, and that'll certainly make a big difference. You mentioned the good guard play. You got a New Jersey heavy roster, and it's certainly in your top contributors. Dan Gaines, Giovanni Rubino, both averaging 18.3 points per game this season to lead the squad. Dan, as you mentioned, has been a guy who's been a big piece for this program for a few years. Giovanni took a big step up this year. For those who haven't seen them play, just what sort of makes each of them so successful on the court?
They're both really smart players. They have a really high IQ. We end up running a lot of spread ball screen stuff because that's what our best players are really good at. And so they've gotten really comfortable making different decisions, different reads based on coverages, and then knowing who their teammates are, kind of what they're good at, what they're going to do, knowing, okay, this guy is going to spot up, that guy might cut, this guy might prefer the ball in this spot on the floor. And so I think one of their biggest attributes is just how smart they are. They tend to pick things up really quickly, whether we're tweaking something in game offensively or even defensively coverage wise. So to me, it's having 2 guards out there that not only have that level of IQ, but also want to share the ball and play off each other. That was one of the things I wasn't sure coming into this season because, early last year when Dan was playing, Gio had some things, some health issues he was handling off the court that kind of limited him a little bit early. And then later in the year, he kind of found his rhythm. And at that point, Dan had been injured. And so he had the ball in his hands a lot more. I was wondering, with both those guys that are both really good with the ball, could we make it work? And, they're 2 guys. They always come and shoot together. They're really close off the court. They got similar personalities. They want to be out there on the court together. And so they play really well off of each other. And then obviously make things a lot easier for the other guys on the court as well.
What about sort of your unsung guys? Who else do you feel like is really contributing to the team's success that maybe isn't as obvious in the box score?
Well, he shows up in the box score, but maybe not scoring wise. Tommy McGuire has been unbelievable for us, especially on the defensive end of the floor and rebounding wise. He's had a couple games, 13 rebounds. I think he had a game with 11. He's come up with some big block shots, some steals. Offensively, he's really starting to figure things out as far as screening, rolling, spacing, different things along those lines. That he kind of leads us on the defensive end of the floor and maybe doesn't get noticed as much. And then, I think there's a lot of different guys. Jason Williams has done a really good job scoring the ball for us. Matt Kempter's come off the bench and had some big threes. Charlie Gillikin is a sophomore who's made a big jump for us, both on the defensive end of the floor as a big guy, but then also stretching the floor on the offensive end with his ability to shoot the ball. And then even Justin Allen, I know offensively his field goal percentage and other things aren't quite where he probably wants them to be, but he's not forcing things, he's not taking bad shots, and he's been really engaged and committed on the other end of the floor as far as helping out defensively with communicating. His ball screen coverage is much improved from where it was last year, and sometimes even though his rebounding numbers might not jump out, I think a lot of times part of that is he plays with Tommy a lot, and Justin's been doing a good job being physical, blocking out. And sometimes Tommy, who's longer and a little bit bouncier, sometimes just skies in and takes rebounds that maybe Justin would be getting. Like I talked to our guys at one point, a lot of times I'm less concerned with individual rebounding numbers and more so with team rebounding numbers, especially on the defensive end. Like, matters more that the team gets the rebound rather than who's getting it. So I think overall we've just had a lot of different guys and probably missing somebody in there. But like I said, guys have kind of bought into finding a role and filling it. And so I think it's like a puzzle. You need all the pieces to fit together. If one's out of place, it doesn't look quite right. And so far this year, we've been fortunate. Another guy who's come in and played really well for us has been Luke Gordos, another sophomore, especially on the defensive end of the floor. He's really taken it on himself to try to challenge himself to become our team's best perimeter defender. And so he's done a really good job on that end of the floor for us as well.
As mentioned, this is your 6th year as a head coach all at Muhlenberg. What has changed about you as a coach, since you were hired in 2017 to now?
Oh, man. I don't know if we have enough time for that.
What's the biggest change then? Let's say, what do you think is the biggest change?
I don't know what the biggest change would be, to be honest. I think, it's the same thing. Coaches challenge players to get better every year, and I think coaches got to do the same with themselves. That I think I've probably done a better job, one with our new assistant coach this year, Jeff Van Gorder, and then our other coaches on staff, of just having more discussions with guys, clearly identifying shot selection and roles for guys and kind of what they should be focused on during practice, and perhaps giving guys a little bit more clarity as to what's expected and kind of the path forward for them. So I think probably maybe just the communication part of that, of continuing to grow as a coach, of, what are the most important things that guys need to understand and identify, and how can you clearly communicate those to the group and get everybody on the same page, bought into what we're trying to accomplish as a group.
Is that something that's like easier or more difficult, do you think? I mean, because you've been around, high academic basketball your whole life, getting kids to all get together when you have such diversity of thought, of opinions, all of those sort of things.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite answers is it depends. And I would say it depends. A lot of it depends on the group. I think we've done a good job recruiting wise, identifying really high character kids that want to be coached and want to get better and want to win. So a lot of times when kids visit campus, they comment on what a great group of guys we have. And, they'll go over and talk to a recruit's family or do things like that. That I think a lot of it starts with the little things like that. I think coaching high academic kids, it can be a plus minus. It a lot of times stretches and challenges you as a coach, because you got to really understand why you're doing things, because kids are going to want to understand, and you got to be able to have answers. And if you don't have answers, you may not get the buy-in that you want to have. Most kids at these high academic schools, if you ask them to run through a brick wall, they're not just going to go run through a brick wall. They're going to want to know why and which part of the wall they should run through and how high it is and what the wall's made out of and all these other questions. And so, again, that comes back to communication from coaches of knowing your group, kind of knowing them individually, right? Like which guys want to be coach, can handle coaching in front of the group, which guys do you need to coach individually, and keeping a pulse on the group and on the team, checking in with guys pre-practice, post-practice, knowing how academics are going, knowing how family situations are. We have a kid who played for Jesse Krasna, whose wife just passed away unexpectedly. And so one of the things was touching base with him and saying like, hey, have you talked to coach lately? And he brought it up to me that she had passed away, and then mentioned that the funeral was going to be the other day, and talked about going home, and asked me if he could, and just had a conversation about, there's a lot of things in life that are much more important than basketball, and family and people you care about. It's definitely one of them. And that I thought it was really important that he go be there for his coach who'd done so much for him. And so I think that's a big part of it too, is just understanding, people get lost. They think these guys are just basketball players or student athletes, and realizing they're people first and that they're players second, and that they have things they struggle with, whether it's academic load, social life on campus, family issues, that those are all things that contribute to their performance on the court. And so there might be days when guys seem like they're not focused or engaged in practice, and it usually 9 times out of 10 has nothing to do with basketball or their level of care. It's they're stressed about a final, or a family member sick, or there's something like that. So that's another thing I think is really important, is just getting to know guys on a individual basis and make sure checking in on them as people first, and then as players second.
You mentioned recruiting, and this might be just sort of total coincidence, or maybe not. As I said, a bunch of your roster is from New Jersey. The majority of it is actually from New Jersey. You're up there, sort of up in Allentown, gives you close connections to Jersey and Pennsylvania, and you're a New York guy. That's just the way it's happened the last few years of developing connections over there? Is it connections from your youth, or how does the roster come together like that?
That's part of it. Muhlenberg as a college in general, actually, the majority of our student population is from New Jersey, more so than PA. And so part of that is brand recognition of Jersey. A lot of people already know Muhlenberg or have expressed interest in Muhlenberg, so it makes the recruiting process easier, versus if you're going to the Midwest somewhere and they haven't heard of Muhlenberg. Now you're trying to convince them of the value of a Muhlenberg education, versus there's a lot of families in Jersey where if they don't have a family member that's been to Muhlenberg, they know someone who's been to Muhlenberg. And in my experience, everyone I've come across, if I'm ever wearing Muhlenberg stuff, always speaks very highly of their experience at the school when they were there. And so that helps with the recruiting. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of it's relationships. We've gotten a few kids from different prep schools up in New England, which typically may not be common at Muhlenberg, but they're coaches that I've had relationships with from my time at Amherst, or from time recruiting, or different experiences down the road, that I think a lot of times it comes down to talking to people that you trust and value their opinion. I know I always try to get down to all your events that you have and kind of ask you which guys you think might be a good fit, as someone who knows the lay of the land a little bit and is familiar with not only Muhlenberg, the school, with your sister going, but also
yeah, had to bring that up. I was going to say, for full disclosure, yes, my sister is a Muhlenberg grad. That is not why we have you on the podcast today, but yes, I am familiar with the school. I've been there once or twice.
But also, I think you've seen us play a little bit, or you're at least familiar with the type of recruits we get. So talking to you and saying like, hey, Josh, are there any guys here you think we should check out? And the academic standards that we have, and kind of the level of basketball that takes place in the Centennial, and so the caliber of student athlete that we have, that you're a guy that if you reach out and recommend a kid, it's definitely someone that we're going to look into, versus sometimes it's a little harder if it's just a cold call or a random introduction. It's like, if you don't have that relationship with someone, you haven't built up the trust yet. Not that they're not right necessarily, but it takes a little bit more research to figure out. And so I think, roster D3 recruiting can be a fickle thing as it is. We during the pandemic, we were on a Zoom call, and one of our better players ended up confessing to me that he had committed to Muhlenberg. We actually recruited him late. A lot of schools in our league were on him, and he committed to us later. And he told me he ended up coming because his buddy was here, and his dad had passed away when he was younger, and so he wanted to be with someone he knew and was comfortable with. And the academics of the school made sense, the basketball made sense, the financial aid made sense, but at the end of the day, his buddy being here was the biggest drawing factor. And so I think sometimes D3 recruiting, a lot of it's work and getting out there and seeing kids and evaluating and having conversations and talking to as many people as you can. But then at the end of the day, some of it's just getting lucky and having the right kid at the right time and the right situation, and things end up working out well.
Well, Kevin, you've talked a lot about getting lucky this season, but so far you guys, better be lucky than good, I guess, because right now you guys, like you said, 5-1 on the season. Some really nice wins under your belt. You mentioned you're playing Drew tonight, 3 straight on the road, at DeSales, at Whitman, at Whitworth. Enjoy the trip to Washington at the end of the month. Conference play starts again against Franklin and Marshall at home on January the 4th. Kevin, best of luck the rest of the season, and I'm sure we will get to a Muhlenberg game at some point in the next couple of weeks. Well, I guess not in the next couple of weeks because we will not be in Washington, but certainly in the next couple of months. And, looking forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me on, and obviously appreciate all that you're doing with the City of Basketball Love, not only recruiting-wise, helping high academic coaches find a lot of really good kids, but then also giving some publicity to the really good programs that we have in the area. We touched on it earlier, but I do think in our league, there's a ton of really good coaches and a lot of high character kids. And so to have someone taking the time to give them some press and some coverage and some exposure that they may not get Division III wise that other levels have is something that we really appreciate as coaches. And I know I always look forward to seeing the content that you guys put out, because you guys do a really good job with it and have high level content that's coming out. So thank you for doing that. And again, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Glad that you could give our guys a platform to get a little bit of exposure here.
Absolutely. Kevin, have a great one. Best of luck tonight, and talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.